Martin Luther was once quoted that he wanted to tear the book of James out of the Bible because he had such a hard time reconciling that with his theology that we were saved by grace alone, through faith alone. Galatians has been a similar book for some who see the church in Israel as being distinct. Now, this verse here in Galatians 6:16, I want to read this to you guys and get your take on it, because in my conversations with a lot of people, this is a verse they point to that says very clearly to them that the church is the new Israel. So let me read this verse for you. It's Galatians 6:16. Paul writes this, "And as for all who walk by this rule, peace and mercy be upon them and upon the Israel of God." And so people say, like, look, Paul's writing to the church and he's saying the church is Israel. Address that.
Paul actually is writing to two groups in this book of Galatians. He's writing to Jewish believers who are telling the Gentiles to become Jewish. Okay. And he's also writing to the Gentiles who are there in the Galatian area. I think Paul's making a very deliberate point here, and that is there are Jews who are trying to lead people away from what the gospel is, and they're not the ones who are going to experience God's shalom. The shalom is on the Israel of God, that is those Jewish believers who understand the true message of the gospel.
And so when you look at the two audiences, then that kind of becomes the difference here, is that Paul isn't addressing everyone that he's writing to in this, but only part of his audience?
Yeah, he's not writing to the Gentiles saying, you're now the Israel of God. He's writing to Gentiles and Jews, and he's saying among the Jews, those of you who understand what I've been saying in this book, you're really the Israel of God.
There we go. And what is it that causes people, though, to make that assumption when they're reading this?
Well, I think a lot of it is presuppositions.
Okay.
And presuppositions are those ideas we have, whether we've heard a speaker provide the idea, or maybe we read it in a book or a commentary. And so we come to the text already having believed something before we get it from the text.
Yes.
And so in this case, I think a lot of people hear, well, the church is the new Israel, or the church is the spiritual Israel. And they come to the text and they have this in their head as they're reading. And so they see Israel of God and they think, see, look at that. The church is the new Israel. But that's not what the text is teaching. As Charlie mentioned, the context must dictate what the text itself means.
Yeah, so let's talk about some Bible study techniques. Charlie, you've been a Bible teacher for a long time. What would you say are some key Bible study techniques that would keep somebody from this type of interpretation?
Well, one of the crucial ones is having multiple translations. If people don't know Greek or Hebrew,
yes,
they need to have multiple translations. My Bible actually says, peace be upon those, even the Israel of God, which is a mistranslation. The Greek word there is just kai, and. But if they have multiple translations open, they say, wait, how come this translation does that, others don't? If they have only my Bible that I have open, they're going to come to a wrong conclusion.
Yes, yes.
So having multiple translations will help,
good.
But also interpreting what's not clear in light of what is clear in the Bible definitely helps.
Right, because there really isn't other passages that you're going to point to in the New Testament that's going to have this type of statement. So speak to that.
Right. Well, for example, if somebody really wants to know Paul's theology on Israel, a great place to go is Romans chapters 9 through 11. And there, Paul is really clear that Israel is still distinct. Their gifts and calling is irrevocable. And so that must align with all the other scriptures. And so what is very unclear here, we need to interpret in light of the very clear. And Paul was very clear in Romans 9 through 11. Israel's distinct. Israel has blessings, and they have future blessings coming as well.
So we have reading the context, not isolating it. We have making sure that we're not reading our presuppositions into the text. We're not eisegesis. We're not reading into the text. We're bringing out of the text. We have multiple translations so we can compare or consult a concordance and look up the Greek, as you mentioned, kai being the word there, and then interpreting the clear first and then allowing that to speak into the unclear. And if Paul's writing 2 chapters in Romans, why would we take one verse in Galatians and force that into there? Very
That's right.
good.
That's right.
So what would you say would be a next step for somebody who's perhaps looking at this video, they've read this passage, they've always understood it as the church has replaced Israel? What would be the next step?
Well, I would end up saying the next step is go back and read the whole book of Galatians again, But try and read it not with presuppositions. Just say, what is Paul trying to write to these people?
Yes.
And follow the argument of the book, what Paul is developing. And then when it gets to the end of the book with this almost to the very end, last verse, what's he saying in light of everything he said before in this chapter, in this whole book?
Very good.
Yeah, absolutely. Reading this verse within the context of the whole book is crucial, not only for this verse, but for any other verse in the Bible. It's called cherry picking verses. When you just pick one thing out of context and then you build a whole argument around it, usually that's on a shaky foundation. And so, yes, the context must be king in this case. And I'd also say for our viewers out there, head on over to the Land of the Book radio program and listen to wonderful Bible teaching there. Subscribe to the Life in Messiah YouTube channel so that you can be notified of all future videos as we talk about a lot of scripture passages and all within the context.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.